people assume that I'm uneducated and interrupted high school to be an unwed mother. And it's like, no, I'm just a single parent. I graduated from college.
There's a lot of stigma associated with Black fathers in particular in terms of where we're engaged, what we do, what we don't do. I'm not coded with this is what dads do. I'm coded with this is what a loving parent does. And I think that helps immensely for my walk as a single co-parent. I've been fortunate enough to come into contact with awesome examples of public fathers throughout my life. What I wanted to do was to create platforms that gave public fathers an opportunity to tell their own stories or to have their stories shared so the people who may not have had that opportunity can glean from it.
Just being able to find a space to sing and dance and have fun, it just brings me really a lot of joy.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dear Family. I took a nice little break and I'm feeling refreshed and ready to roll. I am so excited to bring you my next guests. You are going to love them, the Bruners. Thank you so much for following along this journey with me and subscribing and writing all those awesome reviews and following me on social media at Right Now Rachel. That's right with a W. I hope you are continuing to hang in there during this pandemic. It's definitely throwing us all for a loop, but we will get through this together. Take care and thanks for listening. Today we have not one, not two, but three generations of one amazing family. Barbara Bruner is a mother and grandmother, Dedan Bruner is a father and son, and Ella Bruner is a daughter and granddaughter. The Bruners are here today to discuss healthy single parenting and co-parenting and to dispel any myths about Black parenting while shining a light on the power and positivity of diversity. Ella Bruner is 9 years old and she attends school in Washington, D.C. She loves dancing, singing, fashion, sports, and helping others. Her perfect day includes great weather, spending time with friends on the playground, and an after-school playdate. Dedan Bruner is a California-born, Washington, D.C. transplant who enjoys photography, writing, and exploring the nation's capital with his daughter. When not romping through Rock Creek Park, working on his podcast, Dad Jeans, or writing for his blog on fathering, he can be found training for his next triathlon. Dedan is also a licensed attorney and policy advocate who conducts comprehensive investigations of school-based grievance allegations. And over the last 10 years, he's advocated for equal employment opportunities using his strong relationships with federal, regional, state, and local government organizations while also mentoring young Black men. Barbara Bruner is Dedan's proud mother and Ella's proud grandmother, and she became a single mother just a month after graduating college. After a 23-year career in pharmaceutical and medical product sales, she made the transition from corporate employee to community service. Barbara has been a child advocate for over 20 years, supporting the local court-appointed special advocate programs, speaking up on behalf of children who may have been abused or neglected. Barbara loves to travel, do yoga, write, read, and participate in church activities. She especially enjoys visiting public and private gardens the world over, and she treasures her relationship with her son Dedan and her granddaughter Ella. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you. I want to start by letting the listeners know that I met Barbara when our mutual friend and our writing mentor, Allison Singhi, invited me to join an already established writing group. It's called the Eastside Writers. I immediately fell in love with you, Barbara, because you're so kind and thoughtful and intelligent, and I appreciated your constant writing encouragement and everything else. Also, you gave me great feedback. I'm so happy you're continuing to write. Because we write and talk a lot about our families, I felt like I knew you, Dedan. And then I saw the video that you made with Ella, and I just fell in love with Ella. What a personality you have. And I thought, wouldn't it be so cool to have 3 generations of one family on a podcast called Dear Family. So I reached out to Dedan, and I was so happy you said yes. I also am really impressed with your blog on fathering and your podcast, Dad Genes. This is my first time meeting Ella, and we're doing this via Zoom, so I get to see her beautiful face. So anyways, welcome everyone.
Thank you.
That's great.
So Ella, I know that you and your dad are visiting your grandma. Do you call her Grandbobby?
Yes.
You call her Grandbobby. And I know, Dedan, you call your mom Bobby.
Yeah.
So it's very, very cute and very sweet. And you're visiting from Washington, D.C., and you flew to Pasadena, California. I'm curious, Ella, what do you think of Southern California?
It's really nice to live in a different lifestyle. I've gotten used to it since I come here every summer, and I'm glad I get to come here even through coronavirus, and I've had a lot of fun so far.
That's so great. Ella, I know that it's your summer break right now, but what grade are you going to be starting?
4th grade.
4th grade. Wow. And so will you be going back to in-person school, or is it going to be online?
They said 1 week in person and 1 week digital learning.
Very cool. Ella, I am starting with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
I have a big family. I don't know all my family members, but I've met my closest relatives. What I really like about my family is, or at least some of my family, they don't really care what other people think about them, especially my dad. And he will say it's okay if they don't give you more likes or the best comments because you should be true to yourself.
I love that. So important to be true to yourself. Let's move on to Grandbobby. Barbara, tell us about yourself and your family and where you grew up.
I've never lived more than 50 miles away from where I was born. I was born in Los Angeles, grew up in LA and around Pasadena. Even going to college, I was in Claremont, so it was all within a fairly narrow radius of Southern California. I've traveled quite a lot, but pretty much a California born and bred. I'm blessed to be at a point in my life where I'm retired, but pursuing things that matter to me. I do some work for youth in foster care. I've served on a couple of boards. Writing is a passion of mine, as is travel. And try to insert a little exercise in there, trying to stay fit. I like the fact that I'm free to travel back and forth to DC to see Ella and Dedan under normal circumstances.
And Dedan's your only child. Yes. Dedan, you just heard from your daughter and your mother. Is there anything you'd like to add about your family?
Only that I wasn't allowed to go to school in California, depending on who you ask. But as I understood it, I was not allowed to go to school in the state. And so I figured if I can't go to school in California, I might as well go to the most interesting place that I can find. And for me, it was Washington, D.C. The plan was to go to D.C., to go to Howard for 4 years and to come right back to California. But anyone who's been to D.C. knows that it has a way of holding on to you. So I've been there for 25 years now. And now it's Ella's hometown, and I'm discovering it all over through her eyes, and I'm enjoying it along the way.
So, Rachel, my version of that story is that they gone to the map and said, my mother's here. Where's the farthest I can go and be away from her, but still be on the same continent? Oh, Washington, D.C. looks good. Now, he was in aquatics. He did water polo and swam. So we were looking at schools that had an aquatics program, and Howard University was one, as of the University of Washington, but that wasn't far enough because that was still on the West Coast.
As a mother of a child looking at colleges next year, she wants to move as far away from California as well. I have mixed feelings about that right now with coronavirus, but I understand completely. Barbara, you wrote your final thesis while you were pregnant, and you were graduating from Scripps University in 1976, and you graduated in June. And Dedan was born a month later in July.
Yes.
And tell us about that, and tell us about Dedan's father and what it was like being a single Black woman raising a Black son in the 70s and 80s.
Scripps College requires a thesis, but most colleges don't require a thesis for an undergraduate degree. But I just happened to attend one that did. And I can remember working on a thesis, going down the hall, having morning sickness and throwing up and going back down the hall of the room to finish my writing. You can imagine there were members of my family who were disappointed that I was single and pregnant. I could not add not graduating on top of that. I was determined to finish my thesis and graduate on time, which is what I did. I guess part of the lingering feeling was feeling I had something to prove, that I had to be able to support myself and my son without asking people for anything financially or otherwise. And I think in some respects I made it a lot harder for myself than it had to be. My mother was a real strong support after she got over her initial disappointment. Dedan's father was someone I met in college. We were in a relationship for pretty much the entire time. But upon graduation, he opted to go to the Peace Corps. And essentially our relationship was terminated at that point. And I raised Dedan from infancy on.
So challenging to be a single mom right out of college. Wow.
Initially, it was difficult. I mean, there was time when I required assistance, welfare, to be honest, for a couple of years. But once I joined the workforce, I started as a paramedic for the city of Pasadena. That 24 hours on and off was, as you can imagine, even with a roommate who was like a second mother, it was a rough schedule to maintain with a toddler. I transitioned from that to a pharmaceutical sales rep. And there was enough flexibility in the scheduling, although it had its own set of demands. But from then on, of course, I've been self-supporting up through and to now.
I'm so proud of you and I admire you so much. I really do. You have such a great role model, Dedan. Dedan, you and Ella's mother decided to separate when Ella was 9 months old. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Ella's mom's name is Tamika. One of the things that we were 100% on was our love for Ella. The thing that we couldn't figure out was how to manage and deal with each other. We wanted to be able to preserve our relationship as parents while giving each other the space that we needed to develop as individuals, both me as a father and her as a mother. It was tough on both of us. There's a lot of stigma. There was a lot of outside pressure, but we were still supportive of each other and each other's endeavors. And we had to figure out a way to be supportive, which was clear, both to each other and to the world, and later to Ella. And we've been able to do that fairly well. But yeah, it started at 9 months. She was a first-year law student, and she moved out right around the end of her first semester.
For the listeners that can't see, when you said one thing that was clear was our love for Ella, Ella's face lit up. You have the best smile. It was so sweet because really it's true. It's all about loving children. And this podcast is about 3 generations and about parenting. And I love that because in the end, that's the most important thing, is to support our kids with love. Ella, what's it like being an only child and going back and forth between mom and dad's house every week?
I think so far it's okay. I get all the attention, which is fun. There's no one to have to compete with or anything to get the attention. What's a lot of fun is having 2 of everything. 2 beds, just 2 houses. I always know there's going to be an upgrade at one house. So my room may be bigger at one house, or I may have a stronger bed, or I may have a desk, or I may just have something really special at that house. But it's also kind of challenging specifically now because it's fun to do FaceTime, but it's not the same as having playdates. I've always wanted a sibling, and I just don't know what would happen, because if I don't get a sibling that we mostly agree on, it can be harder, and I still will have to play by myself. But it's also nice to have your own space.
You are so thoughtful. Just so you know, my parents got divorced, and I remember being kind of excited about having 2 bedrooms too. I hope you can have more playdates soon. This question actually comes from Barbara and my mutual friend, Julie Kinrich, and it's for both Dedan and Barbara. What were the things that you wish people understood or didn't assume or didn't hold you to unfairly because you were a Black single parent or co-parent?
Sometimes in a casual conversation with coworkers, I remember once in particular that someone said something about a husband, and I said, "Oh, I'm not married." And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm not sorry. There's no reason you should be. But it's like he was embarrassed. And why would you be embarrassed? That's just the fact of this particular situation. And then the other thing is that people assume that I'm uneducated and interrupted high school to be an unwed mother. And it's like, no, I'm just a single parent. I graduated from college. There are a host of
assumptions.
Yeah, that are kind of unfortunate. And I don't view myself as a poster child for single parenthood, but nor am I a single unwed mother struggling to finish high school. I'm also a little older than people's assumptions. Sometimes navigating around those perceptions people have can be frustrating for me and for the person having those erroneous assumptions too.
Two things come to mind for me. The first is that people assume there's a contentious dynamic between Ella's mother and myself. It's something that we have a lot of pride in because it took a lot of work. People don't just break up and become friends. That's not how it works. We put a lot of conscious and deliberate effort to creating boundaries, but also making sure that Ella came first and then sometimes second and third. Yes, I know this is your day, but she left a ballet shoe at your house. Now what happens? Or she needs this, but the backpack is at my house. Now what happens? It can't work if it's only based on the schedule that's on paper. And I think we do a really good job of being flexible, but a lot of times people don't see that. And frankly, people don't believe what they can't see. Unfortunately, there are times when it's a challenge to explain the dynamic, but I'd rather have a great dynamic that needs to be explained than have a bad dynamic that everybody understands. So that one is worth the effort. The second thing is there's a lot of stigma associated with fathers, Black fathers in particular, in terms of where we're engaged, what we do, what we don't do. I don't recommend anybody be a single parent. I don't recommend any type of parent. You just do whatever's right for your situation. But one thing that I learned from growing up as a product of a single parent is there's no limits. If you need someone to toss a baseball to you, then the parent who's there figures it out. If you need advice, then the parent who's there figures it out. I'm not coded with this is what dads do. I'm coded with this is what a loving parent does. And I think that helps immensely for my walk as a single co-parent.
You must be so proud, Barbara. I got verklempt from that. That's so sweet. It's so true. Dedan, you're coming from a place of love, and that's where you came, Barbara. And that's really what our kids want. All they need is one loving parent. And Ella, you've got two. They're just two different homes, and your parents are working so beautifully together to support you.
You know, what's interesting, Rachel, is being a single mom. I had all the issues that you associate with that. I didn't realize until I observed Dedan with Ella that there's some preconceptions that are just horrible for single fathers as well. And I've written about Tamika's graduation from law school. It was crowded and chaotic because everybody's happy, but the people are lingering around, milling about, waiting between one graduation and a narrower focus event that we were attending. Ella was about 3 and Dedan was holding her. A lot of times people who knew Ella would come up and speak to Ella, which was lovely, but they acted as if Dedan was a chair. There's this whole thing that because Dedan and Tamika opted not to get married, that somehow Dedan's involvement is primarily on the weekend. I don't know if he can count the number of times that someone's asking, will say to him, "Oh, so you're babysitting today?" Why would you ask a father if he's babysitting? I mean, he's caring for a child in the same way that a mom would care for a child. I was totally unaware of that particular mindset until I saw it playing out. And it's really unfortunate. And it kind of definitely made me sensitive to this idea that unmarried Black men are, by definition, absentee fathers. And it certainly doesn't apply to Dedan. And I'm sure it doesn't apply to a lot of men who are involved very strongly with their children, even if they're in separate households.
There are fathers who are not as involved as Dedan. It's really heartening to see the time and the care you put into parenting. We follow each other on social media. The idea of reading together on the bed and the floor is hot lava or whatever, the games you play. I love that. I've been guilty of treating my husband as if he was babysitting and leaving all these directions rather than letting him figure it out on his own. It is a definite conversation to have. We're going to switch gears and come back to parenting in a second. But Dedan, you're an attorney. and a mediator for the Superior Court of DC, and you deal with children who have been removed from their homes due to allegations of child abuse or neglect, which must be really heart-wrenching. What's it like working on Capitol Hill in such a fast-paced congressional office? And tell us about what you're doing.
I've had a couple of different jobs. Capitol Hill is where I was right before Ella was born and right after she was born. And I loved it. It was an amazing place. If you're an information junkie, you learn things, and then 3 days later, you see it on the news. It's a great environment to pursue whatever interest you have, because if there's information about it, it's valuable to someone. And Capitol Hill is a great place to learn. It's a great place to contribute. It's a great place to cut your teeth. It is, however, not a place where longevity is really factored in. And I don't mean that in a bad way, although there is high turnover. But when you think, if you're working for a member of Congress in particular, if your boss only has a 2-year term, how much job security can you have? That's just one of the realities that's baked in. When we were expecting Ella, we went to the Capitol Hill daycare. It wasn't a free daycare. And so there's a 20-month waiting list when your boss only has 24 months that they'll be in office. And a kid takes 9 months of gestation. It's just not a place where you can do a lot of long-term planning. And so my time there after Ella was born was short. It was a great environment, but it was time to go. Mediation is something that I enjoy very much. Learning how to be an attorney teaches you how to take a side, to dig in, and to fight for your cause or for your client. And that's incredibly important. But I think that there's also value that can be gained from finding that space where we both agree and figuring out how we can move forward together. I think that's undervalued in society, and I think that it's something that we need more of. And so I enjoy mediation of all types. I do EEO, which is equal employment opportunity mediation. I do family law, which is when parents are getting divorced, kind of helping them get their agreement together. But child abuse and neglect mediation is what I do the most of, and it is very challenging. It's for those children who've been removed due to particular allegations. I started when Ella was 2, and I distinctly remember the interview question was, what are you going to do when you have a case that comes across where there's a 2-year-old girl involved? Are you going to be able to remain neutral? My answer was, I'm going to do my best, because I knew I wanted to see, from a selfish point of view, what all types of allegations of bad parenting look like. My goal was, if I can see it, I can make sure that it never comes across in my parenting. I think any parent, when being honest, will admit there are days when we aren't our best. There are days when I was asleep and I woke up just in time to avoid X, or 5 minutes after X happened, or that parent who has to make a decision, do I run in the store really quick, or do I unbuckle the car seat and take you in and carry out 3 bags of groceries with the car seat? We've all had those moments. To give you an example, if I live in a 3-story apartment where I have to walk up the steps and I'm taking out the trash and it's 2:00 in the morning and my kid is asleep, am I going to really take my infant out with the trash just so I can be with her at all times? So these are the things that...
I mean, isn't the answer no?
For me, it was. For me, it was. But, and as any parent can tell you, things can happen in a
right.
split second, and the reality is you want to make sure that you're covered as often as possible. But there are just times when, but for the grace of God, there go I. I take those cases. I think they're incredibly valuable. I think it's important to have a person of color as the mediator, because sometimes every single person the parent has, who are oftentimes Black, a lot of the times they haven't seen anyone who looks like them throughout the entire process. Just knowing that the person who's ensuring that this process is handled fairly and in a neutral manner is a valuable service, and I'm happy to provide it.
We need more people like you. Ella, both your parents are lawyers?
Yes.
I bet you're a good debater. I bet you can hold your own. I love also, Dedan, that you're involved with helping find equal opportunities, because one thing Black Lives Matter has taught us is that it's very unequal. So we definitely need more of that. Barbara, tell us about you. How are you involved with the LA County Children's Court?
I volunteer as a CASA, or a court-appointed special advocate. we are a voice for children in court. You're familiar with cases where social workers and attorneys have multiple children that they advocate for. As a volunteer child advocate, I have the luxury of just advocating on behalf of one child. I can attend that child's meetings at school, interact with the child, get a sense of what it is their wishes are, and communicate that to the court. I don't make any decisions, but it helps for the judge to have an additional set of eyes and ears to get a sense of what that child's needs are.
You're advocating on behalf of a child, which is amazing. But I can see where you got that, Dedan. Barbara, you went to Scripps University. Is it 5 or 7 Claremont colleges?
I believe it's 7 if you include the graduate.
The graduate school, right. Scripps is the women's university. And Dedan, you attended Howard University, which is a private, federally chartered, historically Black university in Washington, D.C. This goes for both of you. When you think about where you'd like to see Ella go to college, what are your thoughts about traditionally Black universities versus all women's colleges versus the rest?
Great questions. The one rule is that I don't want her to go to school in DC, much like I couldn't go to school in California. I realized that that would take Howard off of her list, but it's important to me that she spread her wings. Home will always be home. We'll always be there for her, and she'll always have a space. But I want her to give me an opportunity to visit a place that I haven't spent significant time. As for single-sex education or co-ed education, I'm completely open. I want her to go to an environment that speaks to her. Her current school, where she's starting in the 4th grade, is single sex. She actually stated that boys are a distraction in the classroom and that she was interested in going to an all-girls school. I couldn't help but support that. And so if that continues in college, great. If she chooses a school of boys there, I'll get over it.
Ella, my older daughter, goes to an all-girls school. She started in middle school and she's now there for high school. And there's something really special about that for sure. Do you have any thoughts, Barbara?
I went to a women's college, not by design, more like by default, but it turned out to be a good fit for me. My only desire for Ella is that she goes to a place that meets her unique and particular needs. I think sometimes in this worship we have of Ivy League institutions, we don't recognize the fact that that's not suitable for everybody in terms of where their interests or desires are. So go to whatever will meet the needs that you have, that will nurture you and encourage you as you find out what your needs are. You may not know at 18 entering college what exactly you want.
So that's a funny question for me to be asking you, Ella, because you're only 9 years old. But do you have any thoughts on what type of job you want to have when you get older?
Actually, I do. I decided that I would like to have a job based on what I like to do, which is singing, dancing, acting. I love fashion. I used to want to be a baker, but now I just try to limit my things because thinking about what my greatest skills are. So if I can multitask, if I can sing while dancing, while sewing a shirt, or just having fun while being able to stay focused.
I love that. And one thing I want to tell you is you don't even need to limit yourself. You sound amazing. I think you can do it all. Dedan, when you were 35 years old, your mom gave you a box during your first visit home to California from DC after sharing the news that you and your new girlfriend were expecting a child. Inside that box was a telegram that Bobby had sent your father, who was away in Botswana serving in the Peace Corps, announcing your birth. Also included in that box was a letter your father wrote to Bobby a few years later stating that he was moving back to the United States and that Bobby and you, along with your father and his new wife and their children, could all live together, which is not a very American thing, but I guess he thought that would work out. Was this the first time you knew about your dad's offer to move back?
It was definitely the first time I'd seen that interaction. There were other letters in there. There were letters from my grandmother, who Ella's named after, who's my father's mother, and some correspondence between them. But all of that was very new to me. I have met my father. I've spent limited time with him and my siblings in Detroit is where they live now, the majority of them. And developed my own impression, but without being mean. It was never something I longed for because I liked where I was. My mother and I had our own problems, but it was never really an option, nor was it ever really presented as an option. It was an interesting experience because I knew about the Peace Corps. I knew that part. But when I met Ella's mom, I wanted to work for the State Department. I was studying for the exam that you take to see where in the State Department you can go. One of the first things I did was put all that aside because the similarities were just very eerie to me. And while I didn't have any belief that I would follow in my father's footsteps in that regard, I didn't even want the type of catch-22 or the type of hard decision on the table. So just seeing the contents of the box was just a reminder of the things that I wanted and the things that I didn't want. It helped me to crystallize in my mind the type of father I wanted to be.
Speaking of the type of father you wanted to be, you have a great podcast called Dad Genes, exploring the DNA of healthy fathering. And you have two co-hosts, Harris Tay and Brian Jackson.
Yeah.
But you also have a blog called On Fathering, and you've been the author of essays and other publications. And I'll have all of this linked in the show notes. Can you tell us why you feel so passionately about blogging and podcasting about fathering?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm happy to. I don't know if this is a term, and if it is, maybe I created it or maybe I just stole it from someone else. But the idea of a public father is very valuable to me for obvious reasons. I didn't have a father to learn from. I can give you an example of two friends. Both of these friends grew up with their father. When you're at Kevin's house, when his dad came home, you had to go. That was just it. I'd never interacted with Kevin's dad. It wasn't a bad thing, but I just had no idea what that looked like. My other friend, Saladin, when his father came home, it was just a continuation. Thankfully, dads like Mr. Muhammad, Saladin's dad, gave me an opportunity to see, or at least catch glimpses of what fatherhood looked like, of what welcoming people, of what, giving advice, what letting you make your mistakes looked like. And I've been fortunate enough to either gravitate towards or to come into contact with really, really awesome examples of public fathers throughout my life. And so what I wanted to do was to create platforms that gave public fathers an opportunity to tell their own stories or to have their stories shared so that people who may not have had that opportunity can glean from them. It's not that this guy knew everything. It's that this guy just kept trying. If we were only as good a cook as the first meal we ever cooked, everybody would be terrible. And that's kind of what parenthood is. Your willingness to stick to it. Everybody's going through the same thing. Nobody puts a diaper on the right way the first time. But if you stick to it, you build the skill like anything else. I wanted to get that message out while also celebrating those who are doing it. I don't spend a lot of time trying to explode myths or to create narratives because I don't want to convince people who don't believe it. But for those who are interested in it, I want to make sure that they have plenty to see.
I love that. Family doesn't have to be blood related. You may have found some mentors that felt like fathers to you and were great examples.
Some of the most poignant examples came from people who I was lucky enough to meet way later in life, who I wasn't related to at all. I grew up in California from 0 to 17, and then I moved 2,500 miles away from my closest relative. I was happy and thankful to build a family full of people that, while I have no blood relation, but who I very much consider members of my family.
I think it's so important for young Black boys to look up to people that are so willing to be open and vulnerable and have these conversations. And so it's wonderful that you're doing that.
So John Lewis just passed. And one of the things that I've done while I was in DC is I ran a mentoring program. We reached out to Congressman Lewis's office and asked if we could just tour his office. And not only did he say yes, most members of Congress, they take off on Fridays or Thursdays so that they could get back to their home district. He stayed on a Saturday. He opened his office to the boys and he had food. He gave the boys a tour of the Capitol. He took them through the underground passage to get to the actual Capitol. Don't tell anybody, but he let some of the boys sit in the speaker's seat. Those boys' lives will be forever changed because they had an opportunity to have someone invest in them. Mr. Lewis didn't know us from Adam. It wasn't a favor because anybody was connected. It was just how he responded. And there are so many stories of that, particularly as it relates to him. So I thank you for giving me a moment to acknowledge and honor him.
No, thank you for saying that. I know what a special person he was. And how amazing that you were able to be the facilitator for those young boys. That could be the one thing that changed their trajectory. Dedan, you did not have a relationship with your dad, and yet you are truly one of the best dads. And I loved your YouTube video that you made, and I'm going to include that in the show notes. You taught Ella about the Constitution with such kindness and patience and care. And Ella, you brought the glam. Yeah. You were so cute and so spunky, and you had this great spark, and you just lit up on that camera. I can't wait to see more YouTube videos. Here's another question from your grandbobby's friend and my friend Julie, who asks, Ella, if you magically had a microphone that would reach the whole nation, what would you like to say to everyone?
I would like to say, deep down inside of us, there's always a light, and there's always a little pop that's going to shine. And even at the most uncomfortable moments, I learned once from a movie, actually, it's called Sing when you start talking to someone. If you talk to them more often, or if you just start talking, you won't be scared anymore. And so singing or dancing, if you love to dance in front of the mirror and you are dancing in front of a crowd, just imagine it's your stuffed animals, or you're dancing in front of a mirror, or just start dancing and you could feel comfortable.
It sounds like your advice is to jump in and you'll find that confidence. Barbara, you recently wrote an essay called Once a Mother, Always a Mother. It was so relatable to me, especially the line, I stood motionless in the hallway, wondering, not for the first time, how to both love him and leave him alone. So, as the mother of 2 teenage daughters, I'm constantly standing outside their room, about to knock and then walking back away. It's that fine line. We want to save them, but we also want them to learn from their hardship. What's it like being a long-distance mother and grandmother? And how does it feel to have your son and granddaughter with you now?
It's great. I'm enjoying it. It is truly a blessing, especially given the circumstances we find ourselves in. We collectively decided that it would be worth the risk. We're wearing masks and observing healthy protocols, but it's wonderful having the two of them in. Normally I will have Ella at some point in the summer. It's a luxury to have both Dedan and Ella for the entire visit. I don't know if Ella recalls this or if she doesn't share with me, but it took a while for her to warm up to me because I was the absent parent. And whenever I showed up, her father's attention was divided. So we get along well now, but it took a while to where we got that, just because of the distance. And the other thing I wanted to say relative to an earlier question you asked, Rachel, because I may not have shared this with you before, I'm one of 4 girls, and my parents divorced about the same time yours did, just, I guess I was maybe 12 or 13. So I grew up in a very female-dominated household. I just take so much pride in Dedan's passion for being a father, the podcast that he does currently, the blog on fathering, and even before that, his running the mentoring program that was engaged with young boys who were on the verge of manhood, growing up to be men. I just marvel that he turned out to be a person that other boys can look up to. I just am just so grateful.
I understand why you would feel that way. I really do. I'm proud of you, so I can only imagine how you feel, Barbara.
It's so funny because Dedan, I'm going to quote him on one of his podcasts. He said something about, when it came to the discipline, he says, I had a strong mother, a strong grandmother, and a whole SWAT team of aunts. So, so in spite of that female domination in his growing up, he certainly found his way.
Bobby will not toot her own horn. When Ella's school pretty much closed for in-school education for the year, she called me and said, all right, let's set up a time to do Wednesday lessons with Ella. I got an idea, and every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, they had a different lesson they would explore lands unknown. They would look at trees. They would do poetry. And so while it did take both of them a while to warm up to how being a long-distance grandmother and granddaughter would be, they have hit their stride to my and to Ella's mother's benefit.
That is so beautiful. Ella, you will always remember that. And of course, I know, Barbara, you will too, but that's really so special. How great. So that is one of the good things that's come out of COVID. There may be a few silver linings. Now, I'm going to ask you the last questions I ask all my guests. And I am going to start with Barbara. If you could write your younger 20-year-old self a Dear Barbara love letter, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
I would advise myself to relax and trust that it's going to work out. It doesn't give me a license to not try, but I would probably exhale a sigh of relief knowing that through my own efforts and the assistance that people who love me offered me, that everything really was going to be okay.
It's so true. Kind of just having that faith that life works out. All right, Dedan, I'm going to come to you, but I want to first ask Ella. And Ella, obviously, you are 9 years old. Let's think about what advice would you have given yourself before you were starting kindergarten? So you were 5 years old when you were starting kindergarten. What would you have told your little 5-year-old self?
My friends and I would play the same game every day. During free time, we would try to escape to New York from underground. And it never really worked out. And now I'm just confused of how we would get there and what we would do when we got there. I would tell my 5-year-old self that your school is pretty amazing. And it has really good food, a really good playground, really good people, teachers. And not having homework in kindergarten is going to be something we really...
Ella and her friends were really trying to escape school. One of the parents called me and says, "Why does my daughter have her bag packed by the door?" and said that they're going to New York today. So, yeah, the parents had to dig in to foil that plot, but it was in motion.
That is so funny. Well, I taught kindergarten for many years. I love that age. I love that you would have told yourself you're going to a great school and enjoy it. That's part of being grateful and gratitude. That's great advice. All right, Dedan, what about you? What advice would you give your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
I could tell myself a lot, but I'm trying to think what would I have actually listened to. And I think fall in love with your health, particularly when you have the energy, because otherwise you'll spend a large part of your life chasing health. The amount of time that I'll have with my daughter can be directly related to the types of things that I'm eating, and the energy that I'm putting towards being healthy is something that resonates with me now that I wish would have been more front and center before. So no lamenting now, but if I had an opportunity to tell 20-year-old Dedan, the meal plan at the cafe, you don't really have to eat all you can eat every single day.
I can tell you've definitely found health again because you're getting ready for another triathlon. I see all the bike riding you're doing. So that brings me to the next question. What brings you happiness? I'm going to start with you, Ella. What makes you happy?
Just when I get to be myself. Every day, I always tell myself, sing and dance every day. And I always do that because it's a passion. Just being able to find a space to sing and dance and have fun, it just brings me really a lot of joy. And even though I don't have any siblings to share it with, that means I just get my parents' attention and say, hey, let me show you what I'm creating, or let me show you what I'm singing.
Oh my goodness, you make me so happy, Ella. What kind of music do you like?
I like hip-hop music, pop music, some country songs I like, gospel songs. I try to like rap, but I don't always know how to understand rap. I like songs from movies, so I like soundtracks.
Very broad. I love it. What about you, Dedan?
Both Ella's mother and I have very strong personalities, and we're very deliberate in how we approach parenting. Every once in a while, we'll see something in Ella that is very much her own thing. I am always glad, even when her analytical powers are turned against me, I am happy that she's able to find her own space and to advocate, and that she has her own voice. And so the goal is not to teach her, but to give her an opportunity and license to use it. And I'm happy when she does.
That is so sweet. Oh, you're the best dad. That's so selfless. Well, I thought you were going to say bike riding or swimming or...
My legs hurt today, so maybe...
Maybe tomorrow. Okay. What about you, Barbara?
You and I probably share this a little to some degree. When it makes me really happy when I express a thought in writing in a way that is elegant, impactful, and says exactly what I wanted to say. That just, there's a satisfaction I get from that. That's great. And conversely, I get that same joy and satisfaction from reading books that move me in a way that caused me to remember them, or that caused me to stop and say, that thought could not have been better expressed or more beautifully articulated. I'm a fan of the written word, either writing it or reading it.
And I know that you also have traveled a lot and you're in book clubs, so you keep yourself busy.
I do. And it's funny, I used to say I enjoy gardening, but the truth is I enjoy gardens. I don't really like the work aspect of it. I love to visit public gardens. So I was like, yeah, this digging the tomatoes, not so much, but going and seeing a beautiful arrangement of flowers or greenery or just a peaceful garden, I get a lot of joy out of that as well.
I am going to have in my show notes the links to the YouTube video that Ella is in, and on fathering, and the Dad Genes podcast, and Barbara, some of your writings, so the listeners can check you guys out further. I am so grateful. It's been so amazing to have 3 generations of one family. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with me.
Rachel, thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to see and talk with you again.
I know. It's so good to see you. I mean, my smile is so big. I don't think it could get any bigger. Ella, you've got the best smile. Enjoy your time together. Thank you.
Tell Ella is that you've got a daughter who sings beautifully and loves music too. So she knows what it's like to have someone in the household.
I do. And I have to say, it's truly such a blessing and such a gift to hear music all the time. And so I encourage you. I can't wait to hear you sing.
And Ella will tell you that she learned how to sing from me.
Oh, Daddy. We all know that I did not learn singing from you. I'll tell you this. I could sing from my mother's side.
That is a fact that we can all agree. This side of the family has no musical talent whatsoever. But
speak for yourself. Rachel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, really, truly. Bye, guys. Enjoy your time together. This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.